Scale of 1 to 10, how surprised were you by what we saw last night?
Well, Mike, probably before 4 days ago, I would have said a 9. But after what we saw the other day with Tennessee going in and beating up the Rams without Derrick Henry and Denver going to Dallas, the Giants beating the Raiders, all that stuff. I mean, to me, I'm surprised, but it's one of those things in the NFL. I'm just saying that there should be nothing that truly is something that makes you lose your breath. Because, look, every team has the ability to figure out a way to make it harder on somebody. Brian Flores was on Bill Belichick's coaching staff for, 14 years? And every single week, Bill Belichick formulated a game plan that frustrated the opposition. You know, he was never predictable. And I think last night, what we saw in the constant blitzing of Lamar Jackson, we saw something that, and every single time you see a game where a great player like Lamar Jackson gets totally frustrated and neutralized, you say, well, there's the blueprint for beating Lamar Jackson. Well, I'm not so sure of that, because Greg Roman's going to figure out a way. We're going to dump it to the tight end. We're going to run wheel routes out of the backfield. And don't worry about that. We'll figure a way. And they probably will. But for last night, the constant pressure that Lamar Jackson faced, the Ravens just never figured out a way to combat that.
And that's the thing. It's one thing to figure out going forward how to deal with it, but good coaching includes figuring out on the fly what's going on and how to combat it. Peter, last night, there were 38 blitzes between the two safeties of the Miami Dolphins. That's the most by far for defensive back blitzes in years. It just kept coming and coming and coming, and the Ravens had no answer. So until they have an answer, let's just keep doing it. Let's keep using that play that works until they find a way to beat it. And it just makes me wonder what the Ravens are going to come up with, because they clearly weren't coming up with anything as the game was unfolding. It reminded me of what happened with the Bills on Sunday against Jacksonville, where the team that is supposedly the much better team just assumes that if it keeps doing what it's planned to do, it's eventually going to work, not let's dramatically pivot to something that maybe we weren't planning to do. Let's tear up plan A and come up with a plan B on the fly, because plan A is supposed to work against this team because we're dramatically better than this team, and plan A inevitably is going to prevail. I felt like that's the same trap that the Ravens fell into last night.
Hey, look, Mike, for as much criticism as Chris Greer and Brian Flores have gotten for not using their draft picks well, you know, the draft picks that they got in particularly in the Laramie Tunsil trade. And look, until they find a quarterback who's going to be really, really good, so they are going to get criticized. But I'll just tell you this. Last night, I think one of the most encouraging signs, if I'm the Dolphins, is there's a player who nobody in America, unless you're from the Pac-12, because that's where Javon Holland played with Oregon, nobody knew who Javon Holland was. And what Javon Holland is, he was the 36th pick in the draft, and he came with one of the picks from that trade. And so I just always look at things like that. You have to take the long haul view. And look, we don't know about the quarterback yet. You know, Tua Tagovailoa has not been good enough. He's been consistently injured for whatever reason, okay? But he hasn't been good enough. So, whether or not this front office and this coach know what they're doing, a lot of it is going to be told by whether they can find a quarterback. But I thought last night, the best defensive player on the field on either team, and that includes Xavier Howard, who did make a great play, but the best defensive player on the field last night was the 36th pick in this year's draft, which finally started to bear some fruit for Miami.
Well, and I think that's another thing to keep in mind as we get deeper into the season. Teams definitely are going to change. Bad teams will get better. Good teams may show flaws. And the best example of that, you talked about how as of Sunday, this would have been a huge surprise. Based on Sunday, nothing surprises us now. This is a tweet that Michael David Smith of PFT posted just before the show began. Underdogs of more than 7 points have gone 4-1 in the last 5 days. Dolphins last night, Broncos over Dallas, Jaguars over Bills, and Titans over the Rams. Prior to Sunday, underdogs of more than 7 points were 1-26. So from 1-26 to 4-1, just like that, and
that's amazing.
You know it shows that you can get complacent as a good team against a bad team, and maybe it shows in the preparation or lack thereof, in the amount of elbow grease that's spent on devising creative ways to deal with that opponent, because our standard stuff will work against this opponent. Let's save the creativity for the Browns or the Steelers or the Bengals or the Packers. Let's not waste it on the Dolphins. And I say that because after the game, straight to the podium went John Harbaugh, the coach of the Ravens, and he made it clear that this one was on him for failing to have his team prepared. Here's Coach Harbaugh after the loss.
The bottom line is this falls squarely on me as the head coach. We were not prepared the way we need to be prepared. Our schemes weren't up to snuff, and we weren't prepared to execute the way we needed to. So that's it. Not on one player. Our players played their hearts out. They worked hard all week. They did everything they could to be prepared, and we just weren't ready. That's on me. It was hard to get first downs, so it's hard to get a rhythm when you can't get started. Too many times we didn't get started. There were too many 3-and-outs. And there was some crowd noise and things like that in terms of communication. And sometimes you've got to handle blitzes. You've got to put plays together that are a little more complicated. But that's no excuse. I mean, we just didn't handle it well. They're blitzing us, and we've got to handle it a lot better, and that's on us as coaches.
Look, I always appreciate when a coach is willing to take the blame and not blame his players. You blame the players behind the curtain. Publicly, you protect the players. And there are plenty of good coaches who have consistently done that. You don't go out there and say, hey, yeah, well, we came up with great plays. These idiots just don't know how to run them. We're trying to tell Lamar Jackson how to deal with the blitz. Something wasn't working. He's not going to do that. And it's easy to do it when you're one of the best coaches in the NFL. They're not going to fire John Harbaugh because he crapped the bed one night in mid-November, but still, it really does raise some alarms about this Ravens team. When you look at who they have coming up, they've got the Bears. Okay, after that, they got 7 games, and they can lose any, some, or all of them. 2 against the Steelers, 2 against the Browns, the Bengals, the Packers, the Rams. They're going to have to earn it. They went from being, a few weeks ago, a team that we're thinking, hey, they could be the 1 seed again. It could be 2019 all over again, Peter. Now they're going to be in a fight week in and well, they still could be. They still could be, but they're going to have to earn it 1 week at a time.
Look, here's the one thing that I mean, look, 2 observations after listening to John Harbaugh, and I had not heard that until it just played. Mike, I bet twice a week in the NFL, a coach stands in front of the media after the game and says, that loss falls on me. So, and again, maybe it does. And maybe sometimes it does, but maybe sometimes he also wants to take the pressure off the players, as you say. You know what I thought of when I heard him saying that? And he said, it falls on me. We didn't have the schemes to have our players prepared, all that stuff. I think one of the things that he doesn't say is, our offense wasn't prepared for what we faced in this game. And that is going to have to change. In other words, he's not saying, hey, Greg Roman, handle the blitz, will you? If you see it coming early, do something. And the Ravens never could do. Maybe there was nothing they could do. But they didn't do anything to handle the blitz last night. And that, to me, was the most disheartening thing. They never, ever made progress on handling pressure. But you know what the other thing I thought of, Mike, when I'm listening to him? I said, last night after the game, I'm sort of looking at the standings and trying to figure out some of the stuff we're going to talk about today. And if you look at the AFC standings right now, and you go 1 to 16, you don't do them by division, you do it by conference. The 2nd through 11th teams right now, the 2nd through 11th seeds in the AFC right now have either 3 or 4 losses. So what I mean to say is that every single coach from 2 to 11, from John Harbaugh at 2 to Vic Fangio of the Denver Broncos at 11, I would bet has stood up at some point this year, maybe multiple points, and said, man, we just weren't ready to handle what they threw at us today, and that's on me. And the only point overarching that I would make about that is that this AFC is absolutely, unequivocally, almost in an unprecedented way, as wide open at the midpoint of the season as I ever remember.
And that's good news and bad news potentially, because you lose a few games between now and the middle of December and you fall out or you get hot. And I said this earlier in the week. It seems like every year there's a team that's right around 500, right around now, Thanksgiving-ish, that begins to figure it out, that begins to get hot, that begins to realize we have no further margin for error, and we just string wins together and carry it into the postseason, that mindset. You've been in playoff mode for weeks. The playoffs are no big deal. We've been handling this concept of can't lose another, can't lose another, can't lose another. Maybe that urgency doesn't really kick in until Christmas for some teams this year when you look at the standings in the AFC and see how wide open it is. This is Pete Rozell's dream. This is parity.
Yes, it is.
To have that many teams clustered 10 weeks in, and if it can hold, ideally what the NFL wants is everyone alive for the playoffs going into week 18. Still have to get used to saying week 18, and we sort it all out in 10 hours of craziness on the final day of the regular season. That's what the NFL would want every single year. As many teams alive as long as possible. And when you have 11 that are that alive in the AFC, that makes for a great chase down the stretch.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.